Hello, hi folks. I'm Wilfred and I'm here to speak about cloud services buy or build. So, as developers, when we are posed to the problem of deploying something on the cloud, so whether to build our own cloud or Wilfred, and I'm LFX mentee at CSF Harvard, and I also do full stack development. And you can check out my profiles here. So, let's get started. So, here is an application architecture that I had developed and deployed. So it's a Flutter application. Backend is built using Node.js using the Express framework, and MongoDB Atlas is the primary database. So the backend deployments, this whole backend of Node.js and Express, I deployed the backend at multiple places. So the first deployment was on Heroku pipelines. So until Heroku was free, my application was there. It had production and development pipelines. And to develop the application here, all I had to do was go onto the web UI and provide my GitHub repo, and everything was done from there. And it also gave me some default options. Those were great as well. And after the free period of Heroku ended, I switched over to a VPS and I got a cloud VPS, and there I did the whole deployment of the whole application backend. And then the third one is my personal favorite, and if I could host all of my applications from localhost. So I tried using services like nrock and stuff to just tunnel my local host onto the web, but it works for a development purpose, but it is not yet ready for production grade traffic. So, and then finally I deployed the backend onto Google Cloud. So based on these four deployments, I got some idea of what all the deployments have good and bad points of them, and I'm here to share those. So Heroku and Google Cloud. So when my backend was deployed on these two platforms, some of the benefits that I got out of the box are auto CI/CD deployment. So all I had to do was deploy my application, just provide my GitHub repo, and these platforms automatically fetch any code changes that I made. Anytime I pushed something onto the repo, it would get it automatically within a matter of 2 or 3 seconds. I had no idea what was happening underneath. I could see the deployment log, but those were very less informative for me. So after that, there was auto scalability option. So if I had to scale my application according to its traffic, I would just have to go on the web UI and select the scalability options provided by them there, and my application would be scaled automatically. I had no say in the scalability factor. Then there is some sort of default security. So these platforms provide some default security like DDoS prevention. So up to a certain limit, these platforms will prevent our applications from some default security attacks like DDoS. And it was easy to manage. I was the only individual working on the project, and all of the deployment that I had done, I had to do as a web UI. I set up a production pipeline, I set up a development pipeline. All of it was easy for me to manage. Even if I had to scale it up, I would just have to go on the portal, select the options, and that was it. And the VPS deployment. So the VPS deployment which I did it using Kubernetes and without Kubernetes. So the VPS has Nginx server running, Nginx has a reverse proxy, and whatever traffic was there, it would send on to the Node.js application running on the local host, and then it would in turn communicate with MongoDB, and the application would be served. And as Nginx gives some default load balancing, it was not sufficient for me. So I decided to went on with Kubernetes. So the same architecture here. So Kubernetes service is exposed of Kubernetes, and there are two Node.js pods, and they communicate with MongoDB. And for some authentication-based caching logic, I implemented Redis. And for the Kubernetes provider, I went with K3s provider via Rancher Labs. I also could have gone with Minikube, but at that time I just went ahead with K3s. And so this is the architecture, and for this deployment using Kubernetes, I implemented this custom CI/CD pipeline. Then is first push happens onto my GitHub repo, and GitHub Actions are triggered. So GitHub Actions do two things. First, for the containerized application running in the pods, a Docker image is necessary. So that image is stored onto Harbor. So Harbor is an open source container registry, and this registry is deployed on the VPS system. So along with Kubernetes and Nginx, also Harbor is deployed here and exposed. So GitHub Actions would build the image and push on the image onto Harbor. And also I had implemented Argo CD for the automatic deployment management. So I created a repo that consisted of the YML configs of all of my applications config of YML were there in the repo. So the GitHub action would update the image tag, whatever by GitHub actions, it would update the image tag in the YML config. Detect this and it would trigger a deployment. So it would pull the image from Arbor. It was a local pull, and then the Kubernetes deployment would be triggered. So 3 minutes, my whatever changes I had made in my code would be live in production. So this is a pipeline that I built. And now to address the it in the room. So if I have to deploy some application, so would I buy services from existing solutions like AWS and GCP right away go onto the platform and access the services, or would I buy a VPS or a virtual machine instance and deploy and manage everything from there by myself, or would I build my own server using my hardware? So I would then I would install software, and then I would do the deployment process. So the answer to this is it depends. So it depends on various factors. It depends on who you are. So are you a small business owner? Are you an experienced person? Are you a student? So based on your capabilities and who you are in the position, it is, then is it a personal project? So if it is a personal project, I'm starting a new side hustle, I need it fast in the market to test the viability of the idea, then I wouldn't bother and the VM software. I just need it deployed somewhere. So in that sense, in this case, going with the public service would make much more sense. Then how mature is the organization? If it is a business, then how mature is the organization? What skill set the developers it has? What talent it has on board to manage all of the deployment services? So these are some of the primary factors that I consider with the question to deploy something. So, and there are more factors, so we can just go on discussing about that. So, if I were to choose to build using custom hardware, then some of the steps I would need to do is I would first need the hardware. I would need to figure out the appropriate hardware that would be appropriate for my application. So, I need to think about getting the appropriate computer storage, and then I have to finalize the hardware, then finding a place to run. So I need physical space. So I need some sort of safe space, physical safe space to place the hardware. Then if I'm trying to prevent outage prevention, or if I'm trying to put on some load balancing, then I would need to fit in some multiple places, multiple physical locations for the servers. Then setting up the networking. Once the server racks are set up, the devices are set up, I need to set up the networking and proper security and firewall rules and expose them appropriately to the internet. Then I have to monitor the hardware. So monitoring the hardware specifically is the resource utilization properly. If there is excess resource usage, or some disks have failed, or some networking issue has happened, so based on I need to specifically monitor the hardware. And then batteries, backups, and power. Power needs to be there constantly at a consistent flow rate, and it shouldn't be the case that some power mishap happened and the hardware was just fried up. So that shouldn't be the case. And after all of these factors are considered, then I go on to deploying my code. Then I would install software on that. I would make VM instances or stuff like that, and then I would deploy my code. And managing and monitoring the code is a different thing, and the hardware comes with its different challenges. So, in my opinion, unless it is a large scale organization, has all of these resources, they have this physical space that is appropriate to run the hardware. Then they have the talent on board who can manage and set up and manage, because doing from the hardware config takes time from weeks to months. It might even take years for some large scale organizations. So dependingly, if all of the resources that are needed for this are on board, then only I would start with deploying the building custom hardware. Then buying from public cloud offerings. So some of the benefits of these offerings are quick time to market. So if I just have an idea, or I'm a small scale business owner, I can quickly take my product to market. There is no time wasted. As I said, I just had to go on Heroku and Google Cloud dashboard and provide my GitHub repo, and my application was live. So it is quick time to market. Then there are better customization options. So up to a certain scale, customization options are provided better. That let's say for my workload, I'm provisioning a VM, and I don't know how much compute is necessary. So I would first provision a VM with one vCPU and 512 MB of RAM. Then I would provision, if it's not sufficient, then I would provision a VM with some additional more space. So based on that, up to a certain degree, customization options are available. And then these clouds services offer a great advantage of pay for what you use. So pay as you go is a plan offered by these services. So only what you use, you will be paying. But in the case of your hardware, you need to plan ahead and you need to get the hardware. So even if you have, let's say, a storage space of 1 terabyte, you paid for the space, but your applications are using 100 gigs. So the remaining space is unutilized. So you have paid for it upfront, but you are not utilizing the space. So here it's not the case. Here you are paying only for what you use. Then there is some default security that these services provide. So let's say attack like DDoS happens on your service or on your application. To a certain degree, these platforms will give you some inherent security, or they would at least warn you that there has been a sudden spike and a DDoS attack is suspected. And then there is better backup maintenance and recovery options. If you need backup of your applications and your data, they have multi-region, multi-zone backup services. You just have to go on the portal, set up your policy, and the backup would be taken automatically. And in case the application goes down or the region goes down, they can automatically trigger some recovery mechanisms and try to mitigate the damage surface. So these are some of the benefits that these services provide. But some of the cons of these services are vendor lock-in. So let's say you took up AWS as your primary deployment, as your primary cloud, and then you used various of AWS services and you architected your whole application architecture. But after some time, you're realizing that you want to move away, or some service is not performing as you wanted. You will have some better options, but you have a vendor lock-in because no other platform has services that just exactly to match how your application is architected, and you have a vendor lock-in. You cannot move away from AWS even if you want to because you are tightly integrated in their services. Then there is exponential cost increase. So up to a certain degree, these components are free, but for production and business workload, they charge, and the cost can be exponential. So even if you instance running, you can be built. So exponential cost increase happens with these clouds. Then there is data privacy concerns. So let's say you are some medical history, medical organization, or you are a bank or financial transaction. So you hold sensitive data, and there are regulatory and privacy concerns with your data that might be stored onto public offering. So you cannot store your data there. So ultimately, you would have some sort of data storage within your personal or your company network, and then again you're using these offerings. So that is too much moving parts to manage at once, and not to overpay as you go. So again, if you want to limit your scaling up to, because you are trying to save cost and you are trying not to overpay. But since it is it will automatically scale and it will automatically build, you have to keep a watch that you do not overpay for your services. Or up to a certain threshold, if a certain threshold is crossed and your application suddenly starts getting more users and your billing is just increased, but your revenue is not going up, then in that case, these options can prove as not so beneficial. Then there is also lack of options. So if there is a new service that fits your application very well, you want to implement, but your cloud vendor doesn't support it. So you are not left with much options, because even if you want to implement that service, unless your provider or your vendor supports that, you cannot do anything. You would have to ultimately move away from the offering. Then if you're trying to building your own, so the pros it has, the biggest pro in my opinion is abundant customization options. So let's say I had a VM, and what I did was I put up Argo CD, I put up Harbor. Instead of Harbor, I could have used Docker. Instead of Argo CD, I used Jenkins. So I have options of the tools using. So there are abundant customization options available. Then there are fixed costs. If you are getting a VM with cost fixed, and if its resource limit is hit, then ultimately performance and response time of your application would be taking hit. But if you are fine with that and you are more focused on minimizing your cost, then these come with a fixed cost. Then you are in control. Whatever you want to do, if you want to scale up, scale down, or you want to change anything, you want to implement something new, whatever you want to do, you are in control, because cloud VM is just a Linux operating system you're getting, so you can do whatever you want there. And then there is data privacy. If you have sensitive data, you can keep it in-house and your data is safe and secure there. So, and then there is no vendor lock-in, because since you are picking out your technologies and you have the option to move away anytime, you specifically don't face any vendor lock-in. Even if you are dependent on some technology, there are alternatives available as well for that. So the surface of vendor lock-in is quite less in this case. And then the biggest con of this would be need of skilled personnel. Now, if you are trying to implement a certain degree of pipeline that I had implemented using Harbor, Argo, CD, Kubernetes, so you need individuals who are skilled in these, because if you want to take that load to production and scale for up to 1 million users, then you need people on your team who know what they are doing and who have the skills in these necessary tools. So you need someone who would architect the security of your deployment, someone who would deploy Kubernetes and do the DevOps, do the SRE, and then you also need a constant teams monitoring it. And then, as I said, extra efforts for security, because there is no default security provided to you. For my pipeline and my VPS deployment, my security, I was at the mercy of Cloudflare. So whatever Cloudflare was giving me default security, I was just having that security and some basic firewall rules to block the ports. And that's all I had. And then you have to manage, maintain, and monitor all by yourself. So you need 24/7, always an on-call team should be there in case situation escalates and there is some problem. So you have to manage it, you have to maintain it. Now, maintaining and upgrading when this happens, often outages are caused by maintenance and complete action. So you have to maintain it by yourself. But then the monitoring part comes in. If you are trying to monitor now, if your cost, there is a sudden user spike and you want an email alert for that, you would need to pick up an application, you would need to install it, you would need to connect it with your deployment service, and you would need to set up it, and then you would get the email alert. But if you were using a public service, a public cloud, you would just directly get an email that there is a user spike, you need to pay attention to that. So based on that, there is more cost of human effort. The cost of human effort is in time of the salary that is being paid to the individuals working and the time and effort that they are spending. If an effort would be spent at some other place. Now, just for setting up the monitoring, picking up the tool, setting it up, connecting it, testing out if it's working, it takes time and effort. So, whether that effort and time spent was spent in, you need to choose. That is the cost of next backup and recovery. So for backup, you need to set up your backup provider. You need to set up either a custom backup provider or you need to inherently rely on some backup service to store your data. And again, recovery. Recovery is a much more difficult task because you would have to match your production load and synchronize your database and stuff. So again, the complexity of recovery in this case is high. And in the end, so from all these three scenarios, what is the final conclusion that I would give is there is no one answer to all, and you would have homework. So based on some factors, you need to consider those factors, homework, understand the situation you are in, and decide which one service to or which option to proceed with. So some of the points to think about. So these are the points that I personally think about, and I personally take into consideration these points. So the cost. So the cost of the hardware, the cost of the software, the cost of the virtual machine that you are using, the cost of the service that you are using, the cost of the people that are working on the team, all of these, the time cost and the financial cost. All of these costs are needed to be taken into consideration. If you have the budget to go, you can go. Depending on how much financial constraint is there with you, you need to decide. Then your priorities. So based on your priorities, do you need the product up in the outside in the market immediately? So you need less time to market, or whether you need absolute reliability. You need full control of your application and your data. So in that case, you would build your own VM-based service. And if you are having some sensitive data and you need to ensure complete privacy of the data, then you would need to set up something on-prem. You would have to start from your hardware and then go on deploying and go on building. And then there is expertise. So all the tools and technologies that are out there, you need to set up an expert team, or you need to consult an expert team who would architect an appropriate solution for that. So based on that, this is again human cost. So these expertise, they come in at their cost. And if some expert is working on your project and the expert leaves or is not is transferred to some other team, then the work of your project might be delayed because it was dependent too much one person or one single team or one entity. And again, if the expertise is moved, then again your deployment might be at a risk. And then the relevance of these three factors: flexibility, reliability, and security. So for flexibility, you want the flexibility to choose your container registry anytime. But for that, you are compromising security by exposing. So like I said, the hardware deployment that I had, it was exposed to the internet. So if there is some security flaw in that, then my application's images could be directly leaked, or there could be some security there. If I'm messing up my configurations and I'm changing for the sake of flexibility, I'm changing my internal tech, then the reliability might be affected because some service might break and something might go down. And again, that would widen the attack surface. So based on these factors too, the decision should be made. So, so I think yeah, that's all from my side. So let's just go over these points again. Cost, you need to consider the financial cost, the cost of time and effort. Then your priorities: do you need it fast? Do you need it secure? Do you need it reliable? Or do you need it all? Then expertise: who are the people working on here? If you are a student, you're trying to learn, then you might start from a public offering, then you would go on to building your own using virtual machines, then you would go on to building your own hardware. So what your priorities, what your expertise is, and then again relevance of flexibility, reliability, and scale. So once you have a proper balance of all these factors, then you make a much more informed and appropriate decision. So that's all for my talk, and I would like to thank the team of KCD Colombia for providing me with this opportunity to speak here. So I think now we can move ahead with the questions. So if you want to learn more about me, then here's my portfolio, and I'm open for full-time employment opportunities. So you can go my resume as well.